If you're going in a randomized fashion and you train 10 times a week versus training 3 days a week in a very structured and very specific manner, then you're going to be way better off than the person who just comes in 10 times a week and just randomly spatters all over everything. If you're a silly goose and you've got a family and a job to go to, quit your job, do jiu-jitsu full time. No, but if you can't do jiu-jitsu full time and you would still like to feel as though you're progressing, you still would like to keep up with all the guys that are training and competing and doing the best that they can full time, there is actually a way that you can enhance the quality of your sessions without enhancing the quantity. There's a couple of good stories and good examples, a few good examples, I should say, of people who have done this before. Danaher has been on a podcast saying that he had a student who was training 2 or 3 days a week. He ended up going all the way up to black belt and submitting a IBJJF world champion with a heel hook in like 15 seconds at a local tournament. He'd never competed before. But he wasn't spending a whole ton of time in the gym, but he was still able to develop the critical skills that he needed to compete at the highest level. And the second best example is Mr. Paul Adilla, who's won trials 4 times, I believe in the West Coast trials or East Coast, maybe he lost East Coast and then won West Coast or vice versa, however it works. And is a full-time lawyer. I'm pretty sure he owns a law firm. He most notably trains 3 days a week, and he goes out there and submits everybody at trials literally every time. So he's a savage. Imagine running a law firm. I believe he runs a law firm. I might be misspeaking. He might just be a lawyer. Just a lawyer. He might be just a lawyer as a professional. He might not run his own firm. Either way, very impressive. He's still able to compete at the highest level with all of that stuff going on. I don't know of his family or anything like that. I'm going to assume he has a partner or somebody in his life that he cares about. And so if he can do it, you can as well. And so basically what you need to configure is that if you do not have the availability to train as many sessions as possible during the week, you need to figure out some sort of structure where you're at least moving towards enhancing your weaknesses in your training and then also buttressing your strengths. If you're going in a randomized fashion and you train 10 times a week versus training 3 days a week in a very structured and very specific manner where you know your goals, where you know what positions you're going to work on, you know what deficiencies you're building up, you know what strengths you're leveraging, then you're going to be way better off than the person who just comes in 10 times a week and just randomly spatters all over everything. That person is going to have a lot of plates spinning at once. They're not going to have a directed focus. They're not going to have an ability to be able to say, I'm weak in these areas. They're probably not going to be doing positional training. They'll probably be going down the line of just doing what feels right to them or where they can win the round. And that's one of the bigger topics of conversation with people, at least when I'm coaching them, regarding this question of quantity versus quality. The quality of your sessions can immediately be risen just by thinking about what you're bad at and doing that over and over and over and over again. There's really good examples of a lot of professional athletes that get into really poor positions in competition and end up having to tap straight away because they haven't had a lot of time in those positions. You see this most notably with the armbar. The armbar is very difficult to get out of with a skilled opponent ripping your arm apart. But you can tell the guys who spend a lot of time there in those positions doing late stage escapes when they get into those positions because they actually work their way through it. Now, they might not necessarily escape all of the time, but at least you can see the fundamentals of clearing legs off the face and keeping moving and starting to turn the wrist down. And you can tell probably the most recent best example of that is J-Rod in all his recent matches. Even someone like Mika Galvao had heaps of difficulty armbarring him. He didn't even actually, I don't know if he popped him or not, because obviously I wasn't in the match. But he put some pretty fair strain on the arm and stayed with it a fair few rolls. And J-Rod just went, I've been here heaps of times, I just got out of it. So you can tell that his training has a high amount of quality in it, at least regarding some late stage submission escapes. So if you're using that example to start to enhance your own training, you got to think about the big key rocks of positions that you're going to be spending a lot of time in. If you're thinking about competing in ADCC Opens, or maybe you want to do trials or something like that, Turtle would be a really good example. Doing some hand fighting stuff would be a really good example. Half guard would be a really good example. Basically, think about all of the key scoring positions that you see people score out of, and then think about one step backwards before they get points, essentially. So 3/4 mount would be a great example, as would half guard, because it's one step away from mount. High ball ride would be a great example because it would be one step away from the back. So people are going to fight the hardest right when it's right about to score. And so putting time into those positions, a disproportionate amount of time into those positions would be a really great idea, especially considering you only have a certain amount of time on the mats per week. If you had more time on the mats per week, yes, you could go through full sequences, but if you don't have that luxury, you're going to have to think about the most common instances that will basically define a match or define your skill set. And so if you're not competing, that won't be as prevalent to you, but you could still gain a lot of experience in the positions that you're going to find yourself in the most. So basically you have to take a back step. You have to look at your training and you have to say that I'm deficient in these areas, which it's difficult to do as well. But that's why it needs to be spoken about a little bit more, because most people rock up 3 days a week for 10 years and just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And they don't develop any of the critical skills because they only do the things that they feel comfortable with, that they know that work, that they know they can get on the blue belts and the purple belts in their gym, that they can be comfortable doing. And they basically don't develop any variance. They don't develop any width in their skill set or breadth in their skill set. And this is difficult to overcome as well, depending on the culture of your training room. If the culture of your training room is very, I must win the round to feel good after training, well, then you're going to be fighting up against a lot. But if you take your willingness to win every single exchange out of it, I think you develop a lot faster. And so if you only have a certain amount of time to train during a week, taking that element out of it, taking that mindset away and going, I'm going to be curious, I'm going to be inquisitive, I'm going to explore these different positions and see what I can actually do within the myriad of these positions. Maybe I lead myself down a really bad path and I get submitted. Sure, but that's more data, more feedback for the experiment that you can then take into the next session. I would also recommend that you have some sort of tracking within your training sessions so that you can look at what you did last time and then you can improve upon that next time. Because if you're a busy person, like you said at the start of the video, if you've got a family, you've got an intensive job, you've got some dependents, some kids, maybe you've got a bunch of other hobbies, it's quite easy to assume that people don't just do jiu-jitsu with their lives, they've got other things that they do. And so if you've got a lot of that, your jiu-jitsu development isn't necessarily going to be top of mind for the majority of the time. And so you're going to have to take a little bit more of a diligent approach with structuring that out, writing it out, being a little bit more conscious. Maybe your path specifically is filming the things that you want to work on at the end of your session. Maybe your path specifically is writing the things down that you want to work on, either by pen or in the notes on your phone. Maybe it's asking questions of your coach right at the very end and then doing the same thing, writing it down or taking videos or something like that. But if you're limited by time, you're not going to be limited by how much attention you can pay within the specific session itself. So finding a way that works best for you to be able to put yourself in a position where you can take the most away from it is going to be a really good idea. I would also put a ton of focus on the drilling component of your training, not just simply waiting for the rolling to start. I would put a lot of onus on figuring out all of the key details that your coach is showing you or that you're bringing to training via studies or something like that. Because the fact of the matter is the details definitely make the difference. The details are going to be the difference between winning a position and losing a position over a long period of time. And if you're only getting in, let's say you train 3 days a week, you get 5 rounds a night, you get 15 rounds a week, versus the guy who trains 5 rounds a night, or 5 rounds a session 10 times a week. That's a big difference in the amount of time that's going to be on the mat specifically. But if you're doing it in a way where you're focusing on all the little details, you're actually applying yourself properly, you're asking good questions, getting good feedback, you're actually taking what you learned from this session into the next session and then applying that, then you're going to have a significant advantage over the person who's just rocking up to 10 sessions a week, thinking that it's all going to stick, thinking that it's all going to be there when he needs it. There are some special individuals that can do that. We call them autistics. But I dare say that if you only train 3 days a week and you have a job and you have kids and you can make eye contact with people, you're probably not one of those. And so you've got to reconfigure a way to to systemize some stuff on the front end and on the back end. And essentially, it's weird that in jiu-jitsu people just automatically assume you're either good at it or you're not. That's such a weird way to look at things, and they think, well, you either learn fast or you don't. Carol Dweck has a book about this, and it's called Mindset, and she talks about the components of a fixed mindset versus an open mind. The fixed mindset is basically, well, this person has this genetics, so they have these advantages, which means I'll never be able to catch them, or they came from a beneficial family upbringing, and so I won't ever be able to compete with them because they had a head start. Versus the open mindset is more effort based. It's like, I see the amount of effort that they've placed in, and that means I can replicate that, because it's about how much I give to certain subjects rather than what I started with. Because everybody knows there's people who are talented that start and then never end up finishing anything because they're impinged upon their own talents. They start at a very high place, and maybe they get to like a state level or something like that, but they don't ever hit the national level. They don't ever hit the world level. And that's typically because they have a head start. They don't really have to work for much. It comes naturally to them. They don't develop those intrinsic skills. They don't deal with a lot of adversity, a lot of setbacks. Whereas the person who starts at a lot lower level of talent, they have to work their way all the way up through that phase, and they have a better receptivity for their value that they've delivered to themselves that they can now use long term. If we were to say the most important thing that you would need if you were only training 2 to 3 days a week, it would be some sort of structured plan. Whether you develop that on your own, or whether you develop that with your coach, whether you develop that with somebody on the internet. But having some sort of structure, some sort of formalized plan. And don't take those words for like rigid either. Don't take that as like a business plan or a proposal or something like that. It's like, no, today, I've only got 3 days a week. Monday is going to be escape day. Wednesday is going to be passing day, because these are my deficiencies. And then Friday is going to be my fun, creative day where I put it all together. That would be a really easy to follow, simplistic guide for you to be able to deploy resources into. And that way, if you narrow your focus, what you're going to do is essentially destroy the whole narrative of trying to drink from the fire hose, trying to learn too many skills at once. You're going to narrow all of your study focus. So on Monday, you wouldn't be watching anything on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok about anything to do except for escapes. So you'd be actively search. If you were doing study, I recommend that you do. If you were doing study, you go side control escape on YouTube, and then you go and look that up, and then maybe you take a couple of key details. You're like, oh, I'm not doing this, and I am doing this. Good job for doing this, but I need to focus on these two details. So I'm going to put myself in a position to do side control escapes when I get to training, and then I'm going to see how I go on adjusting with those different techniques that I've learned, or those different sequences that I've learned. And then you won't revisit that until next Monday. And so the Wednesday would be your passing. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to look for some passing skills that you don't necessarily have. Maybe you're really good at tight passing and body locks, and maybe you're really bad at Toriendos and getting to J points and north-south passing. So then you either watch a match, or you watch a YouTube video, or you watch an instructional, or you ask your coach for help, and then you configure some ways that you could blend those two things together, leveraging skills that you already have to bring up your weaknesses on the other end, so that you have some sort of tying in, so you don't just get completely obliterated and frustrated and everything else. That's another important point, is that you don't want to just put yourself in the deep end. You actually want to think about how you're implementing these skills as well. Some people will try once to learn a new escape as a white belt on a brown belt who's heavier than them. That doesn't make any sense. It's not that the escape doesn't work, it's that they have much more experience in defeating that escape than you do implementing it. So it's not that you're wrong, it's not that you suck, it's that that person has put more time into the defense for that escape than you have for the offense of that escape. If that makes sense. And so what I tell my students is that you should be thinking about a way to implement these brand new skills against people your weight and your skill, and then leverage your way up step by step, every single step all the way up. And obviously, as you grow and develop, your skill is going to get higher, which means that eventually you're going to have a bigger pool of people that you can start to use these skills against. But at the very beginning, you're pretty much going to be, well, everything's going to be new to you regardless, but you're pretty much going to have to leverage that. And so if you're a guy that's been in the gym 3 days a week for the last 5 years, you're a purple belt, you're going to have a bigger pool of people to use that against, rather than the first person who's a week 1 beginner or 6-month beginner or whatever you are. But if you follow that structure and you actually have a dedicated day for Monday, Wednesday, and then Friday you put it all together, or you just have a little bit of fun and try and find some new things that you want to work on, and put yourself in some strange positions, or maybe you just go in for a smash session where you just try and submit everybody, that's fine. But if that's the bulk of your training, I don't think you get as much development nearly as quickly as what you would if you had structured sessions all the way through. So if you just show up with a little bit more of an idea of what you wanted to do, I think that would be extremely helpful.
I agree.